So I know we're behind by 3 minutes. I know the program's at 3:45 to 5 p.m. But really 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. We requested. So welcome to the Africana Studies panel. The panel is entitled Confronting Power, Exploring Historical and Contemporary Impacts of Colonialism, Slavery and Racism in the African Diaspora. So our description. Africana Studies, a multidisciplinary field of study, examines the histories and experiences of people of African descent and confronts power structures and hierarchies by analyzing the historical and contemporary impacts of colonialism, slavery, racism, and other forms of oppression on African and diasporic peoples and communities. Africana Studies majors, and I'm so proud to have 3 Africana Studies majors presenting today. So they address such impacts from the historical to the contemporary, from an examination of the role of Black women in the evolution of African American music, a legacy rooted in slavery, to an exploration of the treatment of West African soldiers and migrants in France during the 20th century, so as to highlight the enduring legacies of colonialism, manifesting in systemic racism, economic exclusion, and cultural marginalization. And finally, or firstly, because this student will present first, an interrogation of race and power as underlining mining practices by foreign-owned companies in the Dominican Republic. So our first presenter is Africana Studies major, Marcia Rosario. Her presentation is entitled Disruption and Displacement in Sanchez Ramirez, Mining in the Dominican Republic. So you want to go first, right? Yeah. Okay. So I'll be having
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Marcia Rosario. I'm an Africana Studies major student. The topic I chose, I'm actually working on Professor Ranjit with on my independent study. Okay. So for my agenda, I would like to introduce my introduction, the theoretical and the methodology considerations, basically, and mining law, Barrick Gold and Dominican Republic contracts, the effects of mining in the Dominican Republic, and the conclusion. So for the introduction, in this research project, I will be examining the displacement of the inhabitants in the Dominican Republic, specifically in Sanchez Ramirez province, through mining companies. The mining company I will be analyzing today is Barrick Gold. Barrick Gold is a Canadian-owned multinational mining company. The thesis for my research project is mining companies in Sanchez Ramirez province create inequitable living conditions for the residents of the Dominican Republic. The mining results in the displacement of thousands of families while still benefiting these mining companies through financial aid. So, as you guys can see, Sanchez Ramirez is understood as a province. It's located in the city of Cotuí in the Dominican Republic. It's composed of both urban and rural areas of the province. The population of the entire space is about 48,998 people. It has a very strong economy, mostly because of agriculture. Mining also contributes to the economy in Sanchez Ramirez. However, farming is the main source of finance. For the theoretical considerations of my project, race and power are instrumental to understand. So race is defined as a mental construction of colonial rule, which has since permeated the most important dimensions of global power. This story, that is to say that people could be classified by race, was a way to legitimize relationships of superiority and inferiority between dominated peoples and dominators. Max Weber argued that power is the probability that one actor within a social relationship will be in a position to carry out his will despite resistances. Alongside with the concepts of race and power, the idea of respect is something that heavily aligns with these concepts. So according to Maslow's pyramid, there are specific things that we need in order to be able to achieve self-actualization, otherwise known as the top of the pyramid. Self-actualization is the highest level of achievement as human beings because it allows us to reach our fullest potential and accept ourselves and discover our purpose in life. When we're reading the pyramid from the bottom to the top, there are psychological needs, there are safety needs, then love and belonging. After that follows self-esteem, and then lastly, reinstated self-actualization. It's also very important to notice that in the Barrick Gold company, 17 executives are all white. 14 of them are white males, and 3 of them end up being white women. Basically, the Dominican Republic has opened their arms and provided hospitality to Barrick Gold, while Barrick Gold deems them as people who are not deserving of living healthy and valuable, sustainable lives. So the methodology of my research project is basically based on qualitative analysis. I do provide some desk research, content analysis, thematic research, and most of it results from oral histories or sources that are provided by Barrick Gold itself, the mining company, which does show certain biases, of course. So the mining law in the Dominican Republic is number 146 through 71. It establishes that mineral substances belong to the state, thus the government may grant the right to explore, exploit, or process these substances through concessions or contracts. Mining concessions may not be granted to foreign governments either directly or through natural or legal persons. Further, this law indicates that the minerals exploration, exploitation, and beneficiation are public utility activities. According to this Article 17 of Law Number 446 through 71, the government has the power to declare a specific mining zone as a fiscal reserve for the exploration and evaluation of minerals for the establishment of exploitations through special contracts or for other state interest reasons. This mining law was passed in 1971 and it has not been ratified ever since. So the mining law, despite what mining has done for the people of the Dominican Republic, meaning the negative effects of the mining, it seems like the Dominican Republic does not take any of those negative effects into consideration because the mining law still stands today. So Barrick Gold's contracts with the Dominican Republic from 2009 to 2013 are stated here. So during 2009 through about 2013, Barrick Gold, which also owns Gold Corp, invested about $4 billion into the mine of Sanchez Ramirez. The mine was operated by the Pueblo Viejo Dominicana Corporation, a joint venture between Barrick Gold, 60%, and another company, Newmont, which owned about 40%. During 2011 to 2013, there were concerns toward the environmental impact of the mine, specifically including the cleanup of the Rosario's toxic mess, as well as making sure that there were more clean water sources. As you can see in the picture, this is the Majita River, which was also named as the Coca-Cola River because of the brownish color of the river. Barrick Gold, this is the only praise I can really give them, but they tried to fix up the river by making methods to clean up the water source, which as you guys can tell by the after, they did a really great job in doing that. But despite this, there is still more toxic waste going into other rivers located in Sanchez Ramirez. So Barrick Gold's contracts with the Dominican Republic from 2020 till today. In 2020, it was announced that Barrick was sending 2 drill rigs into the Pueblo Viejo mine. The agreement was titled the Earn-In Agreement. In the agreement, it was stated that the company's Pueblo Grande project is subject to an earn-in agreement with Barrick Gold Corporation, whereby Barrick can earn a 70% interest by incurring US $10 million within 6 years and producing a qualifying pre-feasibility study. Moreover, in 2021, it was noted that the Pueblo Viejo mine, operated by Barrick Gold Corporation, paid $108 million in taxes and royalties this month to the Dominican government. This includes an advance payment of income tax, net profit, interest, and royalties, including an advance payment of the royalty for the year of 2021, which was estimated at $47 million. That was the 4th payment that Barrick Gold had made to the Dominican government that year, which totaled out to about $385 million since the year 2020. When looking at all these numbers, the first question that should arise to us is, where's all this money going? Because as we can tell, there's a lot of destruction being done in Sanchez Ramirez, but there's no, out of all this money that's being implemented, there's no schools being built, there's no hospitals being built, which would really benefit the people because they're obviously going through harsh conditions, and there's no new homes being built. And later on in my project, you will see that there's destruction to their homes as well. So the effects of mining in Sanchez Ramirez, water and the environment of Sanchez Ramirez. One of the anecdotes that truly captured what the water source and the people have been going through is the story of Oriani Lima. So Lima's great-granddaughter, Oriani, who is now 9 years old, began developing skin lesions after swimming in the Milwaukee River. Scars from these same skin lesions, which appear as painful boils and rashes, mark the bodies of scores of residents in the villages around the mine with varying severity. Many of the people stayed limp and lifeless fish floated to the surface of the Milwaukee River, located nearby Lima's home, before washing up on the riverbanks. Before Barry came to this land, we were like millionaires, Lima says. We had a lot of water. So I think it's important to notice that a lot of us are, water is accessible to a lot of us. So we kind of overlook the fact that water is something that everyone needs and it's not really attainable to a lot of people in the world. But after reading this, I feel like it definitely makes an impact on all of us, seeing that people are not able to consume the water, to have fun in the water, to even be able to reach livestock from the water. So I think it's really important that we take notice of that. The next part of the effects of the mining in Sanchez Ramirez is agriculture and livestock. So the Dominican culture and environment has been highly affected due to the ignorance and the continuance of mining, agriculture and livestock. Ashley argues the residents recount watching their cattle stock rapidly shrink as cows began dropping dead. Some of the cattle died from bovine anemia, which can be caused by the ingestion of cyanide. The livestock is contracting diseases which are released directly from the chemicals of the mining. Furthermore, Ms. Lima states that these pigs are our main source of livelihood, along with the chickens and growing the cacao bean, she says. Things changed in 2012, shortly after Barrick Gold took over the operations at the Pueblo Viejo mine near the city of Cotuí, located about 60 miles north of the capital. But then they started to die. My pigs would give birth to more than a dozen piglets, and all of them would die within a few weeks. Additionally, this is more about the agriculture. They state in the text that the Dominican Republic's fertile soil and warm tropical climate gave birth to bright green vegetation and trees, but for the villages around the mine, shrunken, black, and moldy fruits dangle helplessly from the barren limbs. As someone who comes from Dominican heritage herself, because my parents are both Dominican, I think it's important to notice that there's no way to really be safe about your food choices now in the Dominican Republic, because you will get diseases from your own food that you're breeding yourself, which makes no sense. If you're making it yourself, then why should I have to be scared of what I'm ingesting? But also the fact that I think it's important to notice that the name of the article is actually the company that's worse than Columbus. So, I think it's important to notice that this is colonization by another name. Just because the people were colonized, they probably don't notice themselves what's really going on. But even though they have proclaimed to the government what's going on, the government seems to not care at all about the well-being. The last and final slide of the effects of the mining is the disruption of community infrastructure and life. So because of the terrible conditions, the pollution being caused through the immense chemicals being emitted in the atmosphere, many infrastructural changes have been made to Sanchez Ramirez. It stated that at one point, teachers were forced to temporarily close the local school because the children were becoming sick. Many children are now not able to access education that is needed for a healthy development of their mental, emotional, and physical well-being. Access to education is already extremely difficult in countries that are not as developed, but when problems are When problems as such are presenting themselves, then people are not able to do much about it. Many homes also have deep cracks in their walls and floors owing to the explosions of the mine. These homes can be prone to collapsing or even the floors being entirely useless, which could have been prevented if the concerns of the people were actually taken into account. So to conclude, the mining of Sanchez Ramirez is a very pressing issue that needs to be addressed by the Dominican government. This issue matters because people are left with no way to sustain a minimum quality of life, and even less a healthy one. People deserve the right to live and to access the basic necessities in life, which constitute the right of living. At the bottom of Maslow's pyramid, food, water, shelter, and rest are part of the bottom pyramid, which are also known as the psychological needs. If people cannot achieve the lowest of the hierarchy, then they cannot fully begin to feel or comprehend the other parts of the pyramid, which are safety needs, belongingness, love needs, esteem needs, and self-actualization, which is the highest of the pyramid. I just wanted to add on that we can create solutions in the midst of this dystopia, but first we must start with the seizing of the mining that is so negatively impacting the people, while benefiting the Dominican government and the Canadian mining companies. It could be your family next, tomorrow, today, who even knows? And it could be done literally in these terrible conditions. So, yeah, thank you.
We have all the presentations and then we have questions after. So next we have Harmony E. And her presentation is entitled Black Migrants and Communities in 20th Century France, Interrogating Racism, Exclusion, and Marginalization. I'm gonna have to get it on.
Hi everyone, my name is Harmony, and today I'll be presenting on the experiences of Black people in France, especially of those from West Africa. My presentation focuses on how French colonialism, war, and national identity shaped the lives of Black people in France throughout the 20th century. My research was from a history class. I'm an Africana Studies major and also a history major. It was really an open research project, but I really made it my business to center Black people. I always interact with, of course, Black Americans, people from the Caribbean, Black British people, but I rarely hear any stories about Black French people. That's what really grabbed my interest. Before diving in, here's a quick roadmap of what I'll be covering. First, I'll give some background on French colonialism in West Africa to help contextualize how these systems of control began. Then I'll examine how World War I and World War II impacted Black soldiers and led to new waves of migration, followed by the continued discrimination they faced in France. Finally, I'll connect these historical moments to their legacies today, showing how colonial structures still shape the lives of Black people in the 20th century France. When we talk about Black diaspora, French narratives are often overlooked. Unlike the US or Britain, France claims to be colorblind, which seems progressive but actually makes it harder to address racism. In this presentation, I examine how colonial rule, military service, and systemic discrimination shaped the lives of Black people in France, especially of West Africans. While trying to gain research for this project, it was extremely hard. I often found sources that only discuss people from North Africa, like Algeria, and I really wanted to find more sources on West Africans, so. During French colonialism, the main agenda was be French and not African, and this presented in many different ways, such as mother tongues wasn't allowed to be spoken in school, and education, Western education was used to erase cultural identity. French colonialization of Africa intensified in the 19th century, especially in West African territories, like Senegal, Mali, and the Ivory Coast. Colonial rule was justified through racist ideologies, like the belief of so-called superior races, that France basically had a duty to civilize others. The ideas shaped not only the life in the colonies, but also how Black people were to be treated in France itself. France used assimilation as its main colonial strategy. expecting colonized people to adapt French culture, language, and values. While it supposedly offered a path to citizenship, in reality it reinforced French superiority. Colonial administrators like William Ponty, who is right here, believed that West Africans could be trained to behave French, but they were never treated as equals. During World War I, over 480,000 African soldiers were recruited to fight in the French military. Many came from Senegal and the surrounding areas, and they were promised rights or citizenship in France after the war. But these men were seen as expendable. One article, a military publication, referred to West Africa as a reservoir for simple men that were strong. So it really just showed the lack of value for black bodies because they just thought they had an endless supply to have them to fight their war. This specific group, I really am bad with French. The terrorists, they were first created during the Napoleon era, but they really gained prominent and they really come into form during the World Wars. But they've been around since Napoleon was around for France. Even while they were fighting, African soldiers were mocked and stereotyped. One example that really stood out to me was the Banana advertisement. It depicted a black soldier selling chocolate, but it used the sentiment of him being happy-go-lucky, reinforcing the racist ideology that Africans were childish and culturally inferior. Just always the same theme of French people having to take care of black people, West Africans. And then they also faced barriers in the French military. Despite their service, African soldiers faced clear limits in the French army. It was really hard for them to rise in ranks. They were rarely allowed to rise, like I just said, and were placed in segregated units, and often sent to the most dangerous battlefields. There was even a policy of removing them during the winter because of racist beliefs that black people couldn't survive in cold weather. This kept them from gaining real combat experience. After both world wars, France had a major labor shortages and invited many former colonial subjects, including black veterans, to migrate. These migrants were given low-paying, unstable jobs and lived in poor housing conditions. The promise of equality and citizenship made during the wartime were rarely honored. Instead, the exploitation simply took on new forms. And just to backtrack a little bit and go deeper into World War II, during this time, racial tensions were really heightened. In 1944, Charles de Gaulle, who is known for not being a Nazi collaborator, and he's also seen as being very progressive in France, he created a whitening policy, which removed about 20,000 African soldiers from the army. The same year, African veterans protested for their unpaid wages at Diasporic camp in Senegal, where they were massacred by French forces. These events revealed brutal racist lengths France would go in order to protect its national image. And with the whitening policy, it was really hard for them to determine because there are some African people who are white presenting in like North Africa. So people that are like Lebanese and Algerian, they get to slide by. So it really only affected West Africans to such a high extent. Colonial resistance and independence. After World War I and II, many African veterans realized that they would never be treated equally in France. So this also helped support the move for independence that countries were already having. The first black African elected, figures like Blaise Diagne, the first black African elected to the French parliament, exposed how service in the military didn't lead to respect or real citizenship. This disillusionment helped fuel their independence movements. Post-war Black life in France. By the 1960s, tens of thousands of West Africans had migrated to France, but life remained difficult. Many were undocumented and couldn't access stable jobs or housing. Racial discrimination was widespread even after independence. France maintained economic and political control over its former colonies, and Black migrants often remained on the margins of French society. In conclusion, Black life in France was and still is deeply shaped by colonialism, war, and systemic racism. France claims to stand for liberty, equality, and fraternity, but its treatment of African soldiers and migrants shows how these ideals were unevenly applied. Recognizing this history is essential for understanding France's racial dynamics today and challenging the ongoing legacy of the empire. And then I just wanted to end on a positive note. During the Harlem Renaissance, it was also the Black Negritude movement. The Negritude movement was both a literary and ideological movement led by French-speaking Black writers and intellectuals from France's colonies in Africa and the Caribbean in the 1930s. The movement is marked by its rejection of European colonialization and its role in the African diaspora and being prideful to be Black, accepting and embracing traditional African values, culture, mixed with an undercurrent of Marxist ideals. Negritude was born from a shared experience of discrimination and oppression and attempted to dispel stereotypes and create new Black consciousness. That's it, my presentation.
Thank you so much. And we'll have our final presenter, Quanta Dublin, presentation entitled African American Music, How Women Impacted Our Music.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wanda Dublin, and I am a communication and media arts major and Africana Studies major. I am also a film and trim minor. So today I'll be presenting African American music, how women impacted our music. This was a final for my African American music class instructed by Professor Barrage. So there are so many Black women who have contributed to the rich history of African American music. And to have an understanding of our present, we have to understand our history and how music was influenced. So I will be giving a brief history of our music from 1619 up until present day. So starting off with spirituals and work music, work songs. During the Atlantic slave trade, Africans endured extreme abuse and were forced to overwork. In order to cope with these treatments, we sang religious songs called spirituals and other work songs throughout the day. These songs used African traditional styles like percussion, which is the act of beating something to produce sound, right? And antiphony, which is call and response. So if I say go, you say go, go, go. There we go. And also polyrhythms, which is a musical technique where two or more rhythms are played simultaneously. And also a cappella. And a cappella is a musical performance without instrumental accompaniment. Folk music. So folk music was retained elements of African music, including antiphony, polyrhythms, and improvisation. Folk songs often address struggle, survival, freedom, love, and challenges of navigating a racially segregated society. Polyrhythm and syncopation, which syncopation meaning accenting the offbeat or the naturally unaccented notes or beats in a musical rhythm. So rhythmic complexities inherited from African traditions were defining features of folk music, And some of the instruments that were played were banjos, fiddles, homemade percussions, and it was a blend of African and European musical influences. Also, if you feel inclined to dance, please do so, because our music and our performances are very interactive, and we speak with our soul. So vaudeville was a popular theoretical genre that emerged in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, showcasing variety of acts, including comedy, music, dance, and magic. And vaudeville was instrumental in having, giving the opportunity for Black people to work, because this was the early times of when slavery had just been abolished, and it was difficult for African Americans to find work. Blues. So blues emerged from work songs and spirituals. Blues emphasize emotional expression, often improvising lyrics and melodies to reflect personal and communal experiences. Early blues music was acoustic and raw, often performed by solo musicians using guitars and improvised instruments. A key figure in the early development of blues is Ma Rainey. She blended vaudeville and blues and mentored young artists like Bessie Smith. So here's Bessie Smith.
My man got a heart like a rocket. My man got a heart like a rocket.
And blues is very emotional. It's very much talking to the struggle of, at the time of, Black women. And you can see that in the performances. So jazz originated from a combination of various Black musical forms, including blues, ragtime, spirituals, and work songs. And it's characterized by elements of improvisation and syncopated rhythms. So here I have Billie Holiday, who was a very influential jazz artist at the time. I'm gonna play Strange Fruit for you. This song is a very powerful song about the lynching of Black bodies.
Blood on the leaves and blood at the root. Black bodies swinging in the southern breeze. Strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees.
Okay, gospel. So the 1940s and 50s were the golden age of gospel music, evolving into a genre rooted in African American spirituals and hymns. This music deeply tied to the Black church and served as a space for worship, community, and cultural expression. Gospel music served as an anthem for the civil rights movement. It influenced extended genres like R&B, soul, rock and roll. Gospel music thrived in churches and community programs, which connected deeply with audiences. And Mahalia Jackson, who I'll play a little bit of, she is known as the queen of gospel. She pretty much put gospel mainstream and was able to perform around the world in front of Black and white audiences. Let's get a little bit of her vocals. She's a powerhouse. Okay, rhythm and blues, and also known as R&B, what we call it today, emerged in the 1940s as a blend of jazz, blues, gospel music, and it became the foundation for popular Black music, African American music. In the late 1940s, the term rhythm and blues was replaced by race records. So at the time, Black music was separated from white music, and it was called race records at the time. And, you know, progressing through time, we know that that separation is not necessary or needed. And R&B emphasizes backing beats, which drives the rhythm and adds soulful vocals. So here we have Ruth Brown. Rock and roll. So rock and roll evolved in the late 1940s and early 1950s by combining elements of rhythm and blues, R&B, gospel, jazz, and country music. It crossed racial lines, appealing to both Black and white audiences during the time of racial segregation. The genre emphasized a fast tempo and a danceable backbeat, typically from the drums and the bass. And Sister Rosetta Thorpe is known as the godmother of rock and roll.
Didn't it rain, children? Rain, oh yes. Didn't it? Yes, didn't it? You know it didn't, didn't it? Oh, oh yes, how it rained. I said it rained, children.
Okay, soul music. So soul music emerged in the late 1950s and early 1960s. Soul blended gospel's emotional depth and antiphony style with a rhythm and instrumentation of R&B. During the late 1960s and 70s, soul music became the voice of Black identity, pride, and the civil rights movement. Soul profoundly influenced funk, disco, hip hop, and modern R&B. And I have Aretha Franklin, who is known for her powerful voice and so much activism that she did for social change. So hip-hop transitioned from the underground to mainstream popularity beginning in the 1970s in the Bronx. It became a significant commercial force during the 1980s. Many female rappers gained recognition by collaborating on tracks with male artists. Female rappers explored a variety of topics ranging from feminism, empowerment, material success. Lauryn Hill, who broke barriers, was a revolutionary artist in hip hop by blending her raps with soulful melodies and live instrumentation. here's one of her popular songs. Okay, last but not least, we're talking about present day pop music and cross genres. So the influence of hip hop on pop music is pivotal. The blends of hip hop and R&B are throughout pop music today. And when we think of pop music and a powerful woman in music, we think of Beyonce. So Beyonce's Lemonade album in 2016 refined the genre by incorporating R&B, gospel, and soul influences with traditional ballads. African American music is rooted in strength, resistance, and creativity, and through music, Black women have impacted our stories and will continue to drive our stories throughout history. And that is my presentation. Thank you guys so much for listening.
All right, so we do have time for questions. May I ask Pamela and Marcia? I'm giving you all the real conference feel. Kept you all the time. Now we're going to have some questions. I hope you all have questions. I have a question.
Before question, do you have any comments?
Yeah.
I want to congratulate all three of you young ladies.
Thank you.
For investing the time and researching. As I'm listening to you, I see PhD dissertations in development. Yeah, that was materially so rich, so I want to congratulate you for really good questions.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm not going to do that. I don't know your name, but we haven't met. This is the first presenter.
Marcia.
Yes.
Okay, Marcia, that was amazing. And so I wanted to know about, are you aware of the activism that comes out of the problems in DR? You're aware of, not aware, but can you talk about that? Is that when you
Yes, actually I was telling Professor Ranjit, the way I found out about this issue was actually through TikTok. And yeah, because a lot of the influencers that have been speaking out about this issue are obviously Dominican, but they live in the United States. So even though they're in the United States, they've been, protesting and doing, like you said, activism in regards to the issues that are going on in the Dominican Republic. Although a lot of people in the Dominican Republic have spoken out, they've done interviews, like I was saying, oral histories as well, to be able to, get more awareness out there. But yeah, that's much of what I know so far.
So there were no question in suppressing voices around the issue that they are. They are free or
Yeah, they're free to express their thoughts and everything, but it kind of doesn't even matter because nobody's doing anything about it.
But they're not arrested.
No, yeah.
I have a question.
Again, amazing job. You definitely feel the passion in each one of the presentations. So thank you for sharing your stories and your research. I have the same question myself. Is it?
Yeah, Marcia.
Similar thing, but you provide some great context and the framework and the lens that you were looking at walking through. And it's true, like if you're so concerned about, worried about the basic necessities, it's kind of hard to think about anything else. But in that, you get to talking about the government. Obviously, they made the decision. They're reaping the benefits. They should be the ones that are accountable. And I just left questions in my mind as to the government structure, what kind of government is in place in DR to allow for this and not be held accountable for it.
I honestly don't know a lot about the government structure, but I do know that the Dominican Republic has faced a lot of problems with corruption. in the past, and this is just, it seems to be a continuance of the corruption that's going on, because if you obviously hear your people speaking upon issues and you're keeping the money to yourself, like I said earlier in the presentation, over $400 million are being placed into the government, and we're not seeing no schools being built, no hospitals that are needed, because obviously kids are getting rashes, adults as well. Like I said, also, like the chemical smells are making people have respiratory problems. None of that is being built for the people, so I don't know where the money is going. That's actually my question as well.
That's all of our questions.
I don't know where the money is going.
Any other questions? For questions for?
Well, you know, I like the fact that I learned new things, and I also appreciate how you guys spend historical time. Some of you are set way back in your days. Like, what's your name again?
Harmony.
I really like that because as a Haitian who know well about colonial France, I was, I learned a little bit more about their exploitation and abuses. But I really, and you take us through time and you placed us in today's reality. I think that was, Professor, that's really remarkable. Did you do this research on your own, or did you dig up and come up with this on your own, or did someone suggest?
All three of you.
All three of you.
For me, I came up with it on my own. It was for a history course with Professor Troyansky. It was modern French history, but it was just really white, and it seems like that part of like the history part of my degree always seems to be more, European focused, and I just felt completely like ignorant to knowing like about Francophone colonies and how I just completely ignored them in my research in general. So yeah.
I love that you found that gap in your research and kind of, told the story about why you were interested in wanting to know more about that.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I mean, this was, my presentation was a final for my African American music class. We didn't have to specifically speak about women. It was just to give a presentation of everything that we learned in that class. However, I don't know if it's because the professor was a man and we focused a lot on men, but we didn't speak too much about women, and I'm just a raging feminist, like I'm burning bras every day and speaking up about us and our treatment. So that was the reason why I wanted to focus on women.
For my research, since I'm working with Professor Randerson, I actually had a few other ideas that I wanted to write about. I wanted to do the school to prison pipeline, mostly. But then, like I said, I saw this on TikTok and I was like, wait, I actually have to write about this. Because I definitely relate a lot to the school to prison pipeline as well, because all of my siblings are people of color, Black men, so I've seen what they've experienced, but I thought, I don't know, I feel like a lot of people don't know about what's going on in the Dominican Republic, so I thought this would be a way to raise awareness in a sense, and also get more people to acknowledge what's going on, because even though they might be aware, the question is always, what does this have to do with me? But like I said, it could be your family next and during those problems, so.
Question, folks. We have a couple more
Can I
minutes.
say one more thing?
No, yeah, I was just
All of it,
asking
you
questions.
say you find that history's landscape is really white dominated. That indicates a problem in our schools and in our society. And we need to do something about that, and I'm glad you are doing something about it. And yours was like male-centric. It was, everything was white men, the male. And that you wanted to make sure that the female voices was there. And I'm very impressed that you mentioned that your families are Black. Because I think one of the issues as as a Haitian who's got family in the Dominican Republic, is that denial of blackness.
I actually wrote that in my paper, that we have a history of anti-Haitianism.
Anti-Haitianism, yeah, and of course the denial of blackness,
Mhm.
like there's no African blood, so how that you work out the voice of some beautiful voices and possibly include a lot of dark skinned Dominican and Haitian Dominicans in here.
Thank you.
Well, to that question, well, these sort of connected. The minors, the people who are working with this particular company that you referenced, are they coming, because I know in South Africa, people come from all throughout the continent. Well, they come from the northern part to go to the Cape to into the mines. But I'm curious, is that the same, do you find that Haitians are also seeking employment in those mines? And do you know, I mean, it's not that you need to know that, but I'm just curious.
I honestly don't know much, but I do know that there was a mining company named the Rosarios earlier there too. So that was actually a Dominican mining company. So they did have a lot of, Dominican workers, Haitian workers in there.
Mhm.
But now that it's Barrick Gold, I have no idea actually.
And have you heard about the casualties that these men
They don't know us yet. They're still
Yeah.
under research.
Yeah, and yes.
are you familiar, are you aware of the casualties that these miners face?
Yeah, definitely.
You are, health-wise,
Yes, because if it's affecting the people already that are not directly in the environment, then you can only imagine what's happening to the actual people who are doing the mining.
Yeah.
And who are these miners?
Right.
Where they coming from? And you know what, and another thing is the number one export of the Dominican Republic is gold.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. If it's happening in the Dominican Republic, they might check out Haiti next, or who knows, like,
It's just the most valuable commodity right now.
yeah.
You take your money out of stocks and you put it into the minerals.
No question for Quanda?
Yes.
Right, okay, so, just the coming up from seeing sinners, like to me it was so cool, like the music and.
No spoilers.
I really not do that, right, but I think, enough of us, there's a lot of music in there, and speak a little bit about the male influence, or it's good to hear, your story and just, sharing the story. Based on that, which individual, if you had to choose one, do you think had the most influence in music?
For me,
For you?
oh my God, that's so hard.
All women?
Oh my gosh, that's so hard. Oh my
Because you kind of focus on one facet, that's what you want.
Yeah, if I had to focus on one, oh no, that's so hard. You know what? Maybe I'll say Whitney Houston, because she was the first, I don't want to age myself, but she was the first CD I brought. She's another just like really influential powerhouse vocally. One of my hobbies is singing, so yeah, she's great. She was so influential with her collaborations, her music. Yeah.
So we have like 3 minutes, but I wanted to ask Harmony, are you aware of any, let's say like monuments, anything in France today that tells of this history of, Africans fighting French wars? So I think it's a history that everyone, knows about.
From what I understand, I don't think so. And I found that really interesting because France has like a theme of like always talking about the Holocaust, like how they don't want it to happen again. Like they have a lot of World War II memorials, but it's more for like white soldiers. They don't really discuss black soldiers like that or have monuments. So.
Well, in all fairness, in France, like anywhere else, you can deny black people, but they're so very visible in terms of French music right now. It's very heavily informed by African music. And there are many ways in which the people of African descent are very visible. But there's no honor paid to them. No outside of just appropriation. There's no real honor attached to that recognition.
And to Professor Raj,
conscience and you prepare your students well. You know,
Up until 3:25, I was smoothly fine. But thank you all so much for coming to support of Africana Studies students. I'm immensely proud to actually have a panel of all majors. Usually we represent, the department is represented at the Expo. We usually have students who are taking our classes. But this year we do have full majors, so
Yeah.
thank you all so much.
You and your students.
Yes.